Okay, welcome to another episode of PSU Turf Happy Hour. This has been a little while since we've done one. I think everybody got busy and was doing other things in the summer, and now we're all back and ready, preparing for the hell that's going to happen in about 4 days when the students start classes. I'm John Kaminsky. I am professor of turfgrass science at Penn State. I'll turn it over to Andy to introduce himself and all the way around to Brad.
Yeah, Andy McNett, professor of soil science and turfgrass at Penn State.
I'm Jeff Porter, assistant teaching professor, turfgrass weed science.
And Brad Jakubowski, I'm the turfgrass irrigation specialist out here. And so we're going to be talking about troubleshooting valve and head sprinklers today. So I guess we'll just get rolling on that.
I'm going to lay some ground rules for people that want to ask questions and stuff. And then I'm going to mute myself, and I see Andy and Jeff already did that. So anybody listening or watching, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. I will monitor that. You can leave comments in the chat, or you can ask questions in the chat too. And then if there's anything that comes up, then we'll just try to address it. But Brad, it's all you.
Okay. Well, let's get started. So I thought a good place to start would be okay, you've got a problem with your sprinklers. What tools would be good to have in your tool bag? So I just thought I would kind of go through kind of a quick list or not so quick list of the different kind of tools that would be good to have in your cart or in your bag or your box or whatever it is that you're taking out there to the field or that you're going to be working with. So let's get started on some of those things. A couple of good things, basic, couple of like a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver would definitely be helpful. And then depending on the kind of sprinklers that you're working on, there are a number of different multi-tools or different kinds that you could have to at least kind of hook them. This is a kind of a multi-tool that'll work with both either like rainbird heads or with Toro heads, and you've got a control for control, kind of a knob here for controlling your rainbird, or if you also want to use it for working with your Toro head. So this one it's kind of a multi-tool. It also will. It's got your kind of your orange tool kind of knockoff here for when you're working with your solenoids and things like that on your rainbird head. So this one isn't too bad. Otherwise, you've got multiple kind of tools this way that we can use for those. Also, one of the things that's very good to have is a pair of vice grip long or needle nose pliers. It's a very good tool to have with that one as well. If you're working with rainbirds, pair of these, your forceps, whatever you want to be using, is very helpful to have with those. Also, when you're working with electronics, again, or with your electrical stuff, a pair of wire cutters, and either a kind of an auto ranging multimeter or just a relatively inexpensive multimeter. So when we're checking voltages and ohms, these would be very, very helpful. We're not going to get into two-wire systems today, but if we had a two-wire system, you would probably also want one kind of a hook amp meter would also be something that you would want to be working with as well. Lots of other tools to be working with. Other ones, a pair of needle nose pliers, long-handled needle nose pliers. Toro, they also have some of these that they'll come oftentimes with their heads. One of the ones that I kind of like are these compound long-handled needle nose like this with that compound, with that kind of that double access point here. You don't have to open up your hands quite as wide to be able to use those. So these are actually kind of handy to be able to get if you can get your hands on a pair of these. Those are also very nice. Channel locks, always good. A couple of pairs of these. A small screwdriver like this for doing a little bit of cleanup, and even with if it's got a magnetic tip on this is also very, very helpful. A small flashlight of some kind, waterproof flashlight if you're working in the hole or you need to be able to find something. These are very helpful. Utility knife is good. Something that you might not be familiar with is when you're working with pipe clamps, kind of your screw pipe clamps, one of these little torque wrenches is really handy. I've been using these since about, I think, 1991, and it's a very handy little tool. These right here, if you're tightening something with a pipe clamp or something like this, they've got a ratchet on them, and then when you get to your right torque, they snap, and then all you have to do is you can pop this off like so, this little handle, give it another little quarter turn, and you're snugged up. So they're really handy. They're about 10 or 12 bucks, and they make working with your pipe clamps really, really fast, really easy. So they're not bad to have. If you can find one of those, oftentimes they were at Lowe's for a while, and you might be able to find these. But these little ratcheting torque wrenches are kind of nice to have as well. And then you kind of get into, depending on the system that you have, your valve insertion tools is always good. You know, this is one for us, kind of a 500 or a 700 series Rainbird. This one's for your hunters. And then again, here's the new version of the Toro valve insertion tool. As you can kind of see, it doesn't have the metal bar coming across here with your alignments. And so these are also going to be very helpful. We'll be using one of these later on today. Okay. Another tool that you may not be aware of is I always have one of these in my toolbox as well. It's just a piece of 1-inch pipe with a cap on it with this one here. So this is oftentimes, it's very nice to have to be able to kind of press down on that to kind of help release pressure off of that, and it just makes it really easy. And we'll be using this one as well a little bit later on when we do some troubleshooting. So these are some of the tools that we have. It's not a comprehensive list, but it's a good list to have when you want to get out there and make sure you're doing something. John.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's a lot of tools.
Right.
Give me an example or somebody who has a situation where you've seen somebody very organized with all of these, with a toolbox or a cart, and maybe a example of maybe people that aren't so organized with their irrigation stuff.
Okay. So how to organize it, or what would be like the bare minimum tools?
Yeah, or just if you've seen good examples of people that have organized it really well, or bad examples.
I guess best example is usually you have a kind of a nice plastic or a waterproof toolbox, and then I would have all of my valve insertion tools and everything that I'm going to be working with inside of the valve, down below at the bottom portion, and then a couple of tray, and then on the top tray then is where I would have needle nose pliers, this one because you're going to be pulling that up, the screwdriver, probably your wire nut or your wire cutters, and your multimeter up on top on the tray. So all your bigger stuff down below there. And also one other thing to have in the bottom then, at least wherever you go then, would be at least 2 pairs of channel locks. So you've got a backup on one of those if you're working with those as well. So I don't know if that helps, John, but that's kind of where I would be with that. Cool. So great. Cool. So, excellent question. All right, so let's keep on moving. So when troubleshooting, there's normal, whenever you're having trouble with a valve and head sprinkler, it doesn't come on, it doesn't shut off, any of those types of things. Normally, you're going to want to look at 3 basic areas. One of them is look at the controller. And like when I was in the Air Force, it was kind of power in, power out, or water in, water out. Oddly enough, kind of a funny story, oftentimes we would get from the pilots when they would land their aircraft, they would come in and they would do a write-up, and it would come to us and they'd say, this particular system didn't work in the OFF position. And we'd say, well, next time go in there and try it in the ON position and see if it works for you, kind of a thing. But we would get some of those periodically. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the controller to see, do we have power? Do we have power coming out of the controller, and then do we have power actually getting to the actual valve and head sprinkler? Okay, that's one of the things that we look at. Then after that, if it's not the controller, then you would look at the sprinkler, would be number 2. And then you would go through, troubleshoot the sprinkler. If it wasn't the sprinkler, then worst case scenario is it's going to be something in between there that you're going to have to then maybe do a little bit more in-depth search. Today, we're going to focus on the controller and the sprinkler head itself. Okay, so before we get started, let's review the operation of a valve and head sprinkler. So here's our valve and head sprinkler here. Okay, and so how these normally work is, on a golf course, a valve and head means that it's got its own individual control, and that's why they like using these, because each one of these has its own valve in head. Okay, so how these normally work then, process of order of operation. The sprinkler or the controller sends a 24-volt signal to the solenoid. The solenoid then is energized, it then charges, and it pulls a little plunger out here, activating the pilot valve. This is the pilot valve. This is kind of the top portion of the control valve here. So we got 24-volt signal comes into the solenoid. The solenoid activates. It pulls the plunger, activates or it opens the pilot valve. Okay, what we have then is down here is you've got your foot valve or your bottom valve, depending on who's kind of naming those, but it's either the bottom valve or the foot valve, and there's a communication tube. Okay, when the pilot valve is closed, okay, when these things, so when one of these energizes or when it's getting ready to be energized, there's water comes up through the bottom here. Okay, water then flows through the communication tube up to the pilot valve, and then it stops. If the pilot valve is closed, that water stops here. Okay, and then what that does is then it no longer, then it equalizes the pressure between the bottom side of the bottom valve or the foot valve and the top, and it keeps this in place or keeps the sprinkler sealed. Okay, when the solenoid is energized, all of a sudden this pilot valve is opened. It allows water to then flow through this communication tube, decreasing the pressure on the top of the valve, allowing this bottom valve then to open up, and water flows through the sprinkler up here, forcing up the head this way. When the circuit then is cut, the solenoid then has a little plunger, closes the pilot valve back off, stops the water flow from the bottom valve up to the pilot valve, shuts it down, your sprinkler closes back up. And so by knowing the fundamental operation of a valve and head sprinkler is very, very important, because then by knowing the order of operation of how this works will allow you then to troubleshoot any of the sprinklers, whether it's this one is a particular is a Toro. If you're working with a Rainbird head, that's this one here, same operation. Okay, you've got your foot valve here, you've got your pilot valve, so to speak, here. You've got your communication tubes. Normally with a Rainbird, you've got two tubes. The one with the tube with the silver clasping is your high pressure tube. This is the one that you're going to be dealing with as far as active communication between the pilot valve and the foot valve. And then also, same thing then comes into play when we're working with Hunter sprinklers. Same operation. Your foot valve's down here, pilot valve's up here. You've got your communication tube. So then when troubleshooting these, no matter what system you have, the troubleshooting portion is going to be very, very similar when it comes to all of those. Okay, that's kind of what we're looking at. So that's the sprinkler operation of these. Okay, so first scenario is, in this case here, we're going to say the sprinkler, we go over there, we fire up the controller, or we do it from our central control back at the office, the sprinkler doesn't fire up. So we need to start to figure out, okay, what happens with this? So let's go ahead. I'm going to then switch cameras on this one here and get started with that. Okay, I'm going to move this here. Oops, bear with me here. All right, so here is our setup. Here's an example of three, it's the same controller with three slightly different configurations, and I've got some different things labeled here. When you're looking at one of these particular controllers, there's some different things to look at. So one of the things that we were going to check on then was power in, power out. Do we at least have power to these field controllers? Each one of these is a single field controller. So up here in the top portion up here, then this is the 5-volt power control for everything that kind of when you're pushing buttons on top of the field controller and everything else like that, that's what controls that portion of the controller. Then we've got 28-volt power station output. That's another one that we're going to be looking at. And then your pump common output module with a light here. So when you turn this one on, one of the things that you're going to want to be looking at then is over here, you're going to be looking at, there's a light up here. This is you're going to need to see if that's an indicator to see if you've got actual power coming into the actual controller itself. Then from there, you're going to be looking at, do I have this light on? This is one that's going to be helping you then figure out, do I have at least power to the rest of the system here? And then a third one, this is your kind of let you know, is there something going on, or at least is there a circuit that's okay here with the output module or the common. And so you need to have all three of those, for the most part, need to be lit up. Sometimes those little LEDs burn out and it'll still operate anyway, but it's good to have to kind of check each one of those as we're doing that. Okay, so those are one of the things that we'll be looking at there. Also, okay, let me. Okay, and so one of the other things to kind of keep in mind is if you're looking at something like this here, is with this one here, you can kind of see I've got these wires coiled up. We've got like, this is a station control wire that's coiled up, and this one here is also coiled up. Oftentimes you may not necessarily see this in a controller type of situation. However, if you can do this, at least on your common wire, what that does is anytime you coil up a wire, you're creating, and anytime an electrical circuit flows through there, you're developing an induction coil. And these then create a magnetic field, and they can then, I guess, kind of, I guess, stymie or kind of limit how much power actually goes through there. So if you have a lightning, if you get a lot of lightning strikes in your areas or power surges, these things then can limit those by doing just something like that. If you're constantly having problems with lightning strikes, this could at least be something to help alleviate that type of a situation. There is having something coiled like that, because as you look in these different portions of these, you'll see coils, wires coiled up everywhere. So as we kind of come in, as we zoom in on this, over here, we got a coiled up wire. That's to help with power surges there. All of these little things right along the bottom there. This is so like with this one here, this is an output control switch module with surge protection. All of these little things are coils of wire to help alleviate or to minimize power surges. Okay, sometimes these output modules have them, sometimes they don't, and so that's something to kind of keep an eye on to see what's going on with there. Okay, other things to look at on your, if you're having problems with power surges, is one of the other things you'll want to look at is, does my particular controller, whether it's Toro or Hunter or whatever, is going in, are these little modules down here is also a surge protection module. So you could have your wires, your common wires hooked up here, or you could have the common wires hooked down here, depending on this. If you needed extra surge control, you could actually have things hooked up down here to kind of help protect you from lightning strikes or problems with power. Okay, so the thing that we're going to look at today, the first thing we're going to look at then is, all right, so we turned our sprinkler system on, sprinkler did not come on. And so we've got to try to figure out what's going on with our system. All right, so one of the things that we're going to do then is we're going to find out, well, do we have, at least when we turn a particular station on, do we have a 24 volt signal being sent out to our solenoids? Okay, so that's one of the first things that we could check. So then with your multimeter here, we will turn this on over here to voltage. We're going to put it on a light voltage here, and hopefully you can see the screen. Oh. Move this out of the way. So, all right, so we're going to check voltages. When we turn this on, that solenoid is supposed to then accept, or it's supposed to receive, a 24 volt signal. So what we'll do then is check each one of these little stations. All of your stations that are controlled with these little dip switches here. So we're going to like check with station 1. Does station 1 have a complete circuit? Well, I've got the black lead hooked up over here to the common portion over here, this one over here. Then I'm going to connect it up to here, and we can see, do we have an output of at least about 25 volts or something, or 20 volts? We're at 23 volts there. So that one's actually pretty good. So it's actually sending a signal to this particular solenoid. Okay, we can go to the next one, and these two are Rainbird solenoids. These two are Toro solenoids. This one here then is a Hunter solenoid. When we turn this one on, it actually, you can kind of hear it's actually buzzing, which is good. But then do we have a signal? Yes, we got a 25 volt signal going to this one, so that one's good. We can check and we can kind of see, how does this one read? The Toro solenoid, how does that one look? Okay, that one's good at 24. This one here is also about 24, 25, that's good. And then the Hunter, we can kind of hear that one click there. And that one is also giving us about 25 volts. So what that's telling us then is we've got power going from the controller out to the solenoid. That's good. Next thing we need to find out then are is, are these solenoids receiving that information, or are they correctly, I guess, getting that signal? And so that would be the next thing we need to do. To do that, these, instead of checking voltages, you need to be able to check ohms or resistance. So we're going to then go down over to here, and the normal ohms range or operating range for your solenoids then is anywhere between 20 and 60 ohms. And as long as they're sitting between 20 and 60 ohms, we should be in pretty good shape. Okay, so we'll check each one of these. All right, so then with these, it's very important to make sure you have them off. If you have an electrical current or an AC current going through there, you'll get an erroneous reading, and you could also then burn up your multimeter. And so we could first check, I've got the leads coming up into here. And so first you could check and see what is the sensitivity of your multimeter. So we will kind of zero it out, and we'll see that, okay, when you have your two leads connected, that's kind of like giving you a short. And so with a short, we're looking at about it's going to still give us about a half of an ohm read. Okay, so let's check each one of these. We should be between 20 and 60 ohms. This one, we're good. It's about 31 ohms. So it's a decently operating solenoid. The next one, about 30 ohms. So this one is working pretty well. This one, it's within spec range. So the Toro is working well. We'll check this one out next. And we see this one gives us a 1, or that's showing us right now, that's showing us an open. We will get back to that one in a second. So this one here could be a little bit, this is why it's important to know what type of system you have, what type of solenoid you have, and then be able to make decisions from there. So with this one, again, it's showing us an open. Okay, on the next one then, we'll look at this one, and we're looking at about 25, 26 ohms. And so this one's also operating correctly. This one here, okay, this one's a little bit of a different one here. This one actually kind of has it's got a little bit higher ohms range to this one here. And so it's got a little bit more of a surge protection. So this one, these are set up at about 30,000 ohms instead of just a regular maybe 30 ohms. So if you don't have an auto ranging multimeter, you're going to need to set this up then to something. You're going to need to set it up so that at least it'll be within the range. So we will be at 200,000 ohm range instead of just a 200 ohm range. And so now when we check this one out, we'll see that we are at about 30,000 ohms. So this is what they would call, this is a spike guard solenoid. So some of your sprinklers could have those. And if you're checking ohms and trying to figure out if that solenoid is good or not, then, and if you get an open, you could think, well, I need to make sure, do I have these kind of solenoids, or do I have some of the others, to see if it was an actual cut in the line or a bad solenoid or something like that. So these would be some of the things that you would check. Another thing that we can do then is a tool that would be very helpful is a station master. That's this little piece here. And with this station master, is with this one here, this one can also then help you to determine, do you have a good solenoid or an open solenoid, that type of thing here. So this one is telling you this is open if it's connected together. If you got a complete circuit, there's a short, and if it's reading some resistance in between there, it'll give you a good light. And so then we can do the same thing with these. We can check each one of these. There's a good solenoid. This one should buzz. It's gonna shatter. That's good. This one's good. This one's good. And that one's also being activated, that one there. And so this is a nice little handy tool. So a station master can be very helpful when testing these. And so this one showed you that even with the spike guard solenoid, it read that one as a good solenoid. Okay, so that's one of the things you can do with this. The nice thing about these is that you can then, if you figure out that, well, it seems like from my controller, everything seems to be working okay. Now we need to go out to the sprinklers and find out what's going on over there. So what we're going to do is we can take the little station master with us when we go over there and check some of these things out. Like so. So, all right, so I'm going to switch back to the other camera real quick. Okay, so right at this point then, we've checked power in. So we've seen that we've got a good 24 volt signal coming from the controller out to the solenoid. we've checked our solenoids. The solenoids, at least from the controller, look pretty good. Next thing we need to do then is find out, okay, let's go out to the sprinkler and see if it really is the solenoid. If it's not, then what else is going on with these sprinklers? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and then switch cameras on this one here. See how we do. Okay, so
Hey, Brad, are the all these systems always so loud? I can't tell if it's a system or feedback, but it was like, sounded like screeching hawks in there.
right, some of those with some of the solenoids, yes, like the Rainbird and the Hunter, both they have a pretty loud chatter. So if you're actually working in a hole and you're able to get that one to activate, you should be able to hear that one pretty well compared to some of the others that don't necessarily chatter quite like that. So, all right. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at then is this one here. This one here is this is a properly operating valve and head sprinkler. And we're going to be able to kind of take a look at a couple of the tests on this one there and see how we do. So with this one, a couple of things that we can do then when we're testing this is, bear with me here. Okay. All right, so here's our sprinkler. We checked everything. We checked the controller. We got voltage coming out to this. Another thing that we can do then while we're out here when you're troubleshooting is you could actually use your station master and find out what's going on here. And so I'm going to turn our water on. So we have, good. That one's energizing. Okay, so we have water. All right, so one of the things you can do with your station master then is actually check and see if this will activate the sprinkler. So we can turn it on, and it's actually telling us then that the solenoid actually is good and it was actually workable. So that's one of the things that we can check. It's like, okay, well, it sure looks like the solenoid is working fine. Okay, another thing we can do then is another thing we can do with our needle-nosed pliers here is one of the things you could also test in with your sprinkler is you could open up your solenoid from here, and that will also allow the sprinkler to activate. What we know then is that we have communication coming from this tube up to here. So if we clamp it, hopefully if we clamp it, try that again. Boom, there we go. So what that's done then is this has simulated shutting off our pilot valve. So this is a very good test to find out, to help us to test when we go to these others, to help us find out what's happening with these. So whether we have the solenoid unscrewed, or if you had electrical power coming to this and you clamp this tube, this is one way to kind of start making tests, start testing the pilot valve and or the foot valve, kind of a scenario. So it's kind of one of the things that we're looking at. So knowing the order of operation of a sprinkler can be very, very important. Okay, so this one I got this screwed back in. So if I release this, this one should remain shut. All right, so our first scenario then with these were, all right, so, oops, I need to move my camera. So,
Brad, while you're getting set up, I'll just mention a couple people had questions about how to make your video large. In Zoom, there's two views. There's gallery view and there's speaker view. So if you can toggle between that, you should be able to get Brad's image to be enlarged.
okay. Cool. Okay. So I will try to see if I can zoom in a little bit with this. Oops. Okay, there we go. All right, so we've already tested. So with this particular sprinkler, so our scenario is sprinklers are not coming on. So we've checked over there. We've checked that we have good power at this coming from the station to here. And we also then, we checked the solenoid from there and it also looked good. We could also then, in this case here, this is energized. We could also then, if we needed to, double check and see with the station master, is it going to work with this? And so we turn it on. We've got a good solenoid light. We got a green light. It's not activating the sprinkler. Okay, so something's going on mechanically or internally with this sprinkler not allowing it to turn on. We've got power, so fortunately power is good. It's just that something isn't working with the sprinkler, so we need to figure that out. So we know that we have communication, so that if we open up this line of communication from here to here, okay, then what that's showing us, then if we open this up, we should get water flowing through here and it should activate the sprinkler. Okay, so one of the things you could do is you would end up then either like dig this sprinkler up, and then what you could do then is disconnect the tube like so, and see if you get water. If it's a normally operating sprinkler, we should have water flowing from here up through the tube, and that would activate the sprinkler. Unfortunately, in this situation, we have no water flowing through here, so if anything, we know something has gummed up the works in this foot valve, and we no longer have water flowing up through here. So it's not allowing water to flow through there. So right now, one of the first things we would have to do then is dismantle this, de-energize this part of the system, and then take out that foot valve or that bottom valve down there and be able to then put that one back in and then hook it back up. And then you would still need to then go back through and confirm that the pilot valve here is still working properly. Okay, so in this situation, we did need to clamp it. We'll go to the next one and see what happens there. Okay, so moving over to this sprinkler here. All right, so again, same scenario. Sprinklers are not turning on. We've tried to activate them. We're seeing what's happening. So let's see what happened. So we could activate it with the, if we wanted to, we could use the station master to confirm that it's working or not. This, I could get wet, we'll see. And we turn it on. We got something going on, but just nothing is allowing it to activate. Okay, it's buzzing, but that's it. Okay, so something's not working quite right. Okay, all right, so from here, let's go ahead and do our same test. We'll pull this one out. We would dig up the tube or dig up the sprinkler, remove the tube, and we do have water flowing out of the tube. Right now I got pressure, so it isn't so pressurized, so it actually wouldn't, normally it would fire up correctly, but in this case here, it has activated the sprinkler when we've done this, telling us at this point, the foot valve seems to be working, but right now, pilot valve isn't. One way to confirm it is to go ahead and clamp the tube, and it shuts it off. So, oops, I'm sorry, I'm kind of in the way here. So, by clamping this tube, we've simulated being a pilot valve. And so with this here, this is showing us then that there's definitely something wrong with the pilot valve. So in this case here, it might, the easiest thing maybe to do instead of trying to dismantle the pilot valve is just remove the pilot valve, put a replacement back in and take the other one back to shop, and then you can kind of maybe troubleshoot it from there. That would be one of the quickest things to do if you didn't want to actually replace the entire sprinkler. So we're definitely seeing something here. Once you've got the pilot valve, the new pilot valve or the correctly working operating pilot valve put in, you would want to then retest it to confirm that the foot valve is working correctly. And so that would be one of the scenarios there. So as I do that, we can kind of see that I put this back up, sprinkler is still not activating, and it should. One of the other things that I didn't test in this case here was with either one of these would be actually going over here, turning it on with a flag key. Okay, is coming over here. Chances are it's going to be on auto. Would be to then turn it to the on position, and that would be one of the first things to do. If you turn it on, can you turn it on manually? If it doesn't turn on manually, then definitely have a problem here. Do the same thing with this one here, is go from auto, turn it on manually, see if you have something to operate on this particular, this sprinkler over here as well. You could do that one over here, as well as this sprinkler here. And so those would be a couple of scenarios then you would be potentially working with these two sprinklers, this one and this one, then would be if they don't turn on and you can't get them to turn on manually or electronically, you could test them that way and see what's happening. All right, so this last sprinkler over here, okay, different scenario. With this sprinkler over here, now this one won't shut off. And so let me go ahead and activate this one. And so this one is not shutting off. And sometimes you might either be one that doesn't shut off at all, or at least maybe let's say it's even seeping or something to that effect. In any of those situations, we have a problem. So first of the things that we could do then is check the key, try turning it off with the key. We go from auto, here's off. It's not off, so then it's, even if we turn it off manually, it still continues to run. So this is auto, off, on. Oh, actually wants to activate that way, but if we try to turn it off, nothing. Still leaking. Okay. So one of the things we could do then from here is test it, see if the pilot valve will shut it off. Do we have a bad pilot valve? If we have a bad pilot valve, if we clamp this, then that should at least help shut it off. We clamp it, still running. The chances are that's telling us something's going on down here in the foot valve. So let's go ahead and we'll kind of take a look and see what happens in there. Okay, so there, we will go ahead and I'm going to de-energize that, and then we will go ahead and let's take this one apart real quick and see what we get. Okay, so I'm going to just zoom back out just a little bit. Okay, all right, so type of tools that we would need for this one is this. All right, so first thing to do is we'll take the cap off. So, to me, it's kind of nice to have this tool. I can actually kind of press down on this if I need to, just to kind of take any kind of pressure off of that. First thing we would do then is remove this upper snap ring, like so. This one's removed. Okay, then remove the riser. Like so. Okay, the riser moved. Like that. This is where it kind of comes in handy then, is to have this little tool here where you can actually kind of push down on that foot valve or that bottom valve just a little bit to kind of take pressure off of. There's a snap ring down there that we need to remove. And allows that to kind of pop up fairly easily. We get our snap ring out, and then you would go in and remove your foot valve. Okay, oops. So you would then want to inspect your foot valve. And as we can see on this one here, the reason, so right now this is what seals or seats against the base of the sprinkler. And as we can see with this one here, there's actually a little chunk taken out of this one here. And so it's not allowing that sprinkler or that foot valve to completely seal or create a seal at the bottom. So no matter what we did up above, okay, wasn't going to allow that sprinkler to shut off. So what we would essentially have to do then would be is replace it with a new one and then go from there. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So that's kind of, this would be one of the reasons like this. Oftentimes then we get some of those that even if we inspect it, we put it back in place. Some of the problems that you could have with that then is, well, maybe it still seeps or has one of those annoying little seeps and it keeps things wet around the head all of the time. And one of the things that you would probably then want to look at would be is the inside the sprinkler, the base of the sprinkler, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So, what I thought I would show. So I'm going to reinstall this bad one into the foot valve first anyway, but remember how to install that with these new valve insertion tools then is you've got these two little teeth. And so there's kind of a lip or kind of an edge on this. This edge needs to be up. It sits in between those like this. And then this sits on like that. Okay. And then you go in, you find your communication tube. There's a little dot on the top of the sprinkler that lines up with this. Press it in like so. Snap it in place. And you're good. Oftentimes, you can then use this if you need to, just to kind of make sure that everything sets in place and kind of make sure that that snap ring sets in place, like so. That's how you would then replace that. Pull that out and you're done. Here, riser back in. Yeah. Snap ring in place. So.
Hey, Brad, what's your cat's name?
Beg your pardon?
What's your cat's name?
Oh, that's Mittens. Mittens. So, oops. Okay. I got something off there. A little bit. Doesn't quite want to seat back in there. Double check and make sure my other seal is in there properly. Yep. That's not wanting to go back on there correctly either. Back in where it's supposed to. And that is incorrect. I got something I missed there.
I imagine this is part of the frustration of trying to troubleshoot and fix irrigation heads. And
It actually, it can be, especially because I'm working in a clean situation compared to working in a hole where you've got mud and dirt and all kinds of crappy stuff going in there to create all kinds of problems. And it looks like my snap ring, maybe my snap ring is not in place correctly. And so that would be the next thing to take a look at. Nope, it wasn't. It was not snapped in place correctly. So, or in correct depth. So, try it again. Good experience. That one there. Boom, like so. Boom, okay. Still not snapping in place quite right. Well, I don't want to take up too much of our time on this one here, trying to get that fixed. I'll get that corrected later. But anyways, I don't want to take up too much more of our time. I'm not, or I could try to get that one back correctly if I needed to.
I think we have about 10 to 15 minutes. So I think don't worry about putting it back in. You'll have a good troubleshooting video for your online classes for the students.
Anyway, exactly. So anyway, so this was not the correct way of putting this sprinkler back together. But anyway, there can be challenges in making sure that you get the foot valve in place, then also getting that bottom snap ring. Otherwise, it creates problems for everything else. So go ahead back over here. Okay, and let me get the other camera back. Bear with me here. And okay.
It's also a good time. Dr. McGraw jumped in. I don't know if he has any sound or if he's on anything, but
Okay.
he didn't get to introduce himself. He
Right.
was
Oh,
having
good.
trouble getting in, but he's here too.
So good.
You don't need to hear from me.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. So anyway, I guess just a couple of things. The differences with a Toro sprinkler, because we were working with Toros there. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have them, but with Rainbirds, remember that you've got, instead of just one snap ring down there, you've got two snap rings that kind of hold that foot valve in place up there. And so it's important to make sure that you have both of those in place. Otherwise, you'll not get the correct operation with only one of those snap rings in place there. Another thing to look for with your with Rainbirds, then if you're kind of working with the pilot valve, is there's a little seal up here, kind of like the Mickey Mouse seal over here, that sometimes can get a little bit worn or worked out. And these things, you can then pull those out and flip them over. Each of these are good to be able to flip over at least once with that. Same thing then when you're working with, at least with Rainbird foot valves, this little piece here, then the screen, what you can do is this seal sometimes gets a little bit brittle. And so if you're having problems with that foot valve and you're getting seeping on a Rainbird head, you may want to just go in there, pull the foot valve, flip this seal over like that, place it back in place, and that should then extend the life of that particular foot valve like so. Do that with that one there. And also then when working with our righty tighty left loosey. There we go. You can just, if you want to try to look at that other seal at the top here, is remove this portion here. This will come out. Kind of, this is kind of like your selector key to, you know, from on, off, and auto. And then inside of there, like you can see in there, inside there is that little Mickey Mouse seal in there. That one there can then be pulled out and flipped over and reused again to kind of extend the life of that if you're having troubles with your pilot valve. So it's another one to kind of look at as well there. Otherwise, operation on some of these is very, very similar to that as they are with the Toros and or the Hunters. So anyway, those are just a few kind of things that we can kind of talk about tonight. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, things that I might have missed from the group?
I have questions. One, excellent presentation. I feel like a student in one of your classes. How many camera setups do you have in there? What's your whole garage look like to be able to pull this off?
Today I only used 2 or 3 cameras. Otherwise, sometimes I usually have a couple other cameras that might be one from overhead. I was going to try to get an overhead one on the sprinkler that we were removing, but I wasn't quite sure. I didn't have a long enough cable to get me over there to be able to do that and still keep things dry. So normally I have about 4 cameras. So I've got the laptop camera, then I've got the Zoom and Pam camera. Then I usually have two other wide angle cameras that I try to incorporate somehow, or that one that you actually loaned me that has actually been working. That's worked out really well too. That one's really easy to use. So cool.
And what about all the setup? How is it? This is your garage, right?
Yes, it is. So it changes. This one I actually ended up, since we're doing a lot of irrigation stuff, I pulled it out to the very edge of the garage door. Normally I usually have it in the back, so I just kind of pulled out everything here. So I have an extra computer monitor over to my side that I can hopefully kind of see what I'm doing when I'm standing away from there. I apologize that there really wasn't much FaceTime, just mostly my shins and my hands, I think, when we were doing those, but I wanted to kind of focus on the sprinklers themselves. So
Mike Hartley commented that I should loan you a drone, but I don't think it'll fly inside your shop. One of the things that I always see people do that do really good online presentations is they'll have a camera like way up in the corner as like a behind the scenes camera that you can go and see the whole setup. Because I'm fascinated. I'd love to see like your entire setup. I don't know if you could switch to one of the camera modes and then like show us around your area. Can you do that?
Right now, I guess I don't. Everything's pretty much just kind of pulled up front, so there's not much to show.
Okay.
I can. Let's see. I can kind of switch. I think maybe switch to this other one here. I've got two of the other tripods kind of taken down at this point. Otherwise, I've got. Let me zoom back out. There's different software control for the zoom controls on this other camera, and makes it a little bit of a challenge. Let's see if I can zoom back out with that one. So like today, then I've got my laptop here with this other monitor here to kind of help me to see what's going on when I'm standing out there on the driveway, kind of working with the sprinklers, and I would be able to see what was going on with those over there. And then kind of hard to see. Bear with me here. And so then I've got. So then for today's work, we didn't quite get as much through this, but then I've got this over here. And then I guess I'm not sure if I can kind of zoom around over to the other side, but then I usually have an additional camera or two over kind of back there. I've got my stacks of materials back there. Then I've got another couple set of tables back there that I oftentimes use, and I'll have a couple of cameras set up over there. Otherwise, then I'll have another one set up on the table there. Here's there. That's kind of what I've got that set up like today, with these over here, with my manifold kind of down here. I can kind of see that very well.
I see all that electrical on the ground next to all that water. I was like, oh shit.
Right. So I'll need to make sure that I've got it. Fortunately, it's on a breaker plug. So, but anyway, those are some of the things that I'm trying. At least for this one, I was doing a little bit differently on that one there. So
awesome setup.
These little snowballs, actually, for Mike's. How's my sound when I was over by the sprinklers? Was the sound okay?
Yeah, it was good.
Good. So these little snowballs actually have been really helpful. I was thinking they were more directional, but this one seems to be multi-directional. I can kind of get away from there and not have to be, not as worried about sound nearly as much. So that one actually works pretty well.
Yeah, I have one. I don't use it anymore, but they have multiple settings on it. You can have it like directional, or you can have it like pick up all the sound. So you must have it on. Okay. Picking up everything.
Cool. Are there any questions?
I think it's useful to mention that Brad teaches a whole 15-week-long course on irrigation with lots of hands-on things for anybody who hasn't taken his course or isn't about to take his course. Put in a little advertisement there, both online and residently.
Right. Mike Hartley has been a huge support for the classes that we do. Jim Gersler out at Aquarius. Mike Hartley out with the Turf Equipment Inc. And also Bob Kapranica out in Pittsburgh. He's been very helpful with a lot of things out there as well. So we've got a lot of support with whether it's Rainbird, with Heath Traver, with Rainbird, and a bunch of people. Warren out at Hunter, and just. Been very, very good. We've been very, very fortunate with all the people that we get support from. It's been great. So.
Hey, can you mention what your course online is? Somebody asked, like, it would be great to have this online, but it's already online. So
actually, it is. It's brand new as of last spring. We just kind of wrapped it up, and it's Turf 307 on the World Campus class, and so that's the class that we'll be having this fall. But it's more of it'll be kind of a combination residential and online this fall. So good question. Hopefully hopefully you guys, everybody was able to kind of pick up maybe a couple of tidbits on the troubleshooting angle on it. Some of those things, at least with the electrical and some of the mechanical. Mike, any suggestions? Is Mike still out there? Mike, you got anything for us?
He said you did an awesome job.
Thanks. Thank you, Mike.
Brad, what semester do you offer this course through World Campus for somebody who's completely at a distance? They don't have to
That's
show up.
the spring semester.
Spring semester.
Yep, spring semester. And actually, we were able to do a lot of some good cutting edge stuff with that one there. So it's kind of a new model World Campus class for us that we were able to work with the instructional designers and the videos and things like that. It was a lot of fun to make. So it was a good class. So we were able to kind of incorporate a bunch of good things with that one. So thanks for the instructional design crew too.
Anybody else have any comments and stuff in terms of one of the things that I'm fascinated with, especially that's why I asked the question about the teaching online. A lot of us are going to have to do some hybrid or all online or a mixture of it, and having multiple camera angles and good audio with like his snowball mic. Anybody else have any thoughts on what they're going to be doing this fall? And it starts in a week, less than a week. Silence. Crickets.
A lot of crickets out there. So it's just
it's tough. Like I'm trying to figure it out. I don't have to teach for another month, so I'm kind of waiting to see what happens on campus. But I'm geeked out about it. I bought a switchboard to have like multiple camera angles like you have, but quickly be able to switch back and forth, and a green screen, and like I can talk over top of my PowerPoint, but everything will be live. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
So Ben's done a lot with Cultura and stuff like that, which has also been pretty effective too. That's a good tool to have. That Cultura has been good too. So, and I'm also going to try to, if I can, again, since we have kind of a split class this semester with some resident students and some online students, I'm going to try to put together some at-home packs for them to be able to do a lot of the activities that we're doing in class, to have them at least get some of that active learning at home as well. So trying to put together some packets with that, so it'll be good.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. We do have a couple questions in here, so I figured I'd pass them along. Anthony asked, what's the experience, if you have any, with for the Rainbird offered courses online? Has anyone done any of those through their website?
Actually, I did 3 of them this summer. I did the 3 troubleshooting ones. I did decoders, the 2-wire, and then just regular, and then troubleshooting valves. And they do a nice job. They're actually pretty good. And they very responsive as they're going through that. And they put together some pretty good, some pretty good quality content in there. So they're definitely worth it. I think right now they're on sale for like $79, I guess, a session, which isn't too bad. And you get some handouts with it, and they're not too bad. So the Rainbird ones are pretty good. They do a good job with it. They're well done. Any others, John? Were there any other questions?
No, Mike mentioned about his setup. I guess he's got the ATEM Mini Pro, which is like that thing I bought, the switchboard. And so I was just replying to him personally, saying that he can give me some suggestions on how to use it most effectively. But it's a pretty good option. I think you've got a pretty good setup though, in terms of not even having that, just being able to toggle between the camera angles with, for a class like you teach in a lab, I think the camera angles and being able to not just be standing in front of a camera is really effective.
Cool. You'll have to keep me posted on your switchboard. I'd like to see if that's something I need to kind of maybe look into with some of these things.
Well, I'm hoping that we are not doing this for very long and we can go back to normal, whatever that normalcy is. But yeah. Any other questions? There's a couple comments in the chat. I don't know if there's questions. No, just comments saying thanks. Everybody seems to be happy. Anthony says he'll search for your class for the spring to sign up.
Excellent.
So maybe we'll give if there's no more questions, I'll give, we just go around, and if anybody has any parting thoughts. I know McGraw rolls his eyes when I say that. He doesn't want to talk on camera. But Yeah, anybody have any comments or thoughts, last minute thoughts?
Great job, Brad.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks.
Excellent job.
Was very good. I'm glad to kind of get together with everybody again. You know, you don't see each other for a while, and you're used to working with each other. It's nice to see everybody again.
Good to see you, Vern.
Yeah, you too, Brad.
Yeah, and that whole presentation you just did was awesome. I thought it was good, so I echo everybody else's sentiments.
Thanks, Vern.
One thing I will say is I think that it hasn't been confirmed, but I think Tyler Bloom wants to come on and do a session in a couple weeks. So we might have another one of these within the next week or two, talking about how to get your labor, get people hired and motivate young people and work with, you know, even younger people like high school students and schools to try and recruit people and grants that you can get to help pay for them and stuff. So I think he's going to come on and talk about some of that. So I think that'll be our next episode. But Brad, excellent job. Thanks everybody that was able to make it today, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks, everybody.